wet during tomorrow afternoon in western parts of Scotland as well. Elsewhere, for many places, it's a fine day, staying quite misty and murky around the Northern Isles, but quite a bit of sunshine over central and eastern parts. And a warmer day, 25, 26, maybe even 27 Celsius. Obviously cooler with this rain further west. That could be quite heavy again by the end of the day. And then later tomorrow through the evening, a risk of further thundery showers coming up from France across parts of eastern England. So plenty going on this week. Low pressure remains out west. Weather fronts continue to drift in, but all the time warm air never too far away from parts of England. Plenty going on this week. Further thunderstorms likely.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to a whole new week of On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan. For the next hour, we're talking about two vital issues affecting pretty much all UK consumers. First, the off-gem energy price cap, which puts a lid on soaring household energy bills. The regulator wants the cap to be adjusted more frequently than once every 6 months at present. But will that help hard-pressed customers to have lower fuel bills? Possibly not. Plus, we're talking broadband charges. One industry expert tells us that some broadband providers are acting, quotes, like sneaky inflation bandits, raising prices beyond what is justified, which the providers, of course, deny. Again, we discuss what's really happening on the money after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the government believes it can make significant changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol within the original protocol framework. Boris Johnson's due to hold emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders today in a bid to break the Stormont deadlock. He's threatened to override parts of the protocol despite EU warnings it would breach international law. The Assembly's been plunged into crisis in the wake of local elections. The DUP have refused to join a devolved government. Sweden will send diplomats to Turkey today in an attempt to overcome objections to the Scandinavian nation joining NATO. Applications for new membership require unanimous approval from all existing NATO members. Sweden's expected to make a formal bid today, ending 73 years of internal opposition to the move. Finland confirmed yesterday it would also be applying for membership. McDonald's says it started a process to sell its business in Russia. The fast food giant closed all its restaurants operating in the country in March, having operated in Russia for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue business there. GB News has been told that more than 2,000 people are waiting in areas around the French ports of Calais and Dunkirk to try to make it across the Channel. More people are being driven to the area daily. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has been investigating.
This morning, despite gusts of more than 30 miles an hour in the Channel, people smugglers were still shoving small migrant boats into the water. This border force rib delivering some of those pulled from a small boat just after 6 a.m. Over the weekend, at least 600 crossed the Channel, but poor conditions led to several rescues of boats in trouble on the French side of the water. There are, we're told, more than 2,000 people waiting in areas around Calais and Dunkirk for the chance to make the crossing. Sources say more are being driven in from cities, including Lille, on a daily basis. Despite confirmation from the Prime Minister over the weekend that the first 50 would-be asylum seekers have been notified they'll be flown to Rwanda within a fortnight, there appears, for now at least, to be no reduction in the numbers determined to cross. Mark White, GB News.
The London Mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Sadiq Khan was listed in a 180-page manifesto called Kill High-Profile Enemies that had been published online by Peyton Gendron. Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo on Saturday. The London Mayor says the best response to terror threats is resilience.
To recognise that one of the things these terrorists want us to do is to change the way we lead our lives. They want us to not come forward if you're a minority, if you're a woman. They want us to cower and be scared. We can't allow them to succeed. So make sure we're always vigilant, never complacent. The best response to terrorists is to make sure we're resilient and we don't allow ourselves to be cowards.
As school students across the country start their end-of-year exams today, head teachers have raised concerns about a lack of invigilators. The Association of School and College Leaders found a third of schools hadn't been able to recruit enough people to supervise GCSEs and A-levels over the summer. Well, they said increased anxiety in pupils who've then requested to sit exams in separate rooms, plus invigilators' concerns about catching COVID, were some of the reasons behind the shortages. The Queen has received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. She's made a couple of visits to the horse show last week, her first public appearances since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. You are up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up on the money today, will more frequent changes to the Ofgem energy price cap help cash-strapped households to lower our energy fuel bills? Plus, are broadband providers ripping us off? One industry expert says we're being fleeced by sneaky inflation bandits, putting up prices more than justified. Or broadband providers, of course, deny wrongdoing and say that their price rises are fair. And today's In-Depth Money Talks interviews. It's with Essex pub landlord Adam Brooks. During the pandemic, Adam became a leading hospitality industry advocate when he accused the Prime Minister of throwing pubs to the wolves. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of those messages later in the show, so stay with us, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Now, the energy regulator Ofgem has proposed updating the energy price cap quarterly every 3 months rather than 6 months as now. If ministers accept this change, it would apply from this autumn, meaning the cap on household gas and electricity bills would change in October and again in January next year. Ofgem says the move means customers will benefit sooner when energy prices fall on wholesale global markets from their current highs, meaning households get lower fuel bills soon. A more frequently set cap, says Ofgem, would also help suppliers more accurately predict how much energy they need to purchase to meet future household demand. From October 2021, the cap on the average household bill was raised to £1,277 a year. It was then increased again, as if I need to tell you, at the start of April, to £1,970, a rise of almost £700 a year, 54%, a change affecting 22 million households. Since the April price cap rise was announced in February, war in Ukraine has pushed up oil and gas prices on global markets even more, given Russia's status as a major energy exporter. So it's almost certain that come October, household utility bills are set to rise even more, just in time for winter. But ministers are hoping that by early next year, energy prices will be falling again on global markets, not least if war in Ukraine eases. And they want those reductions passed on as quickly as possible, with a more frequent adjustment of that Ofgem price cap. In the meantime, to help ease the energy crisis, the UK is importing massive cargoes of liquefied natural gas delivered to ports such as Milford Haven, which have LNG terminals and storage facilities. However, the Telegraph has today revealed that critical gas shipments into the UK are now being turned away from our ports because of fears over our lack of gas storage. Energy is at the heart of this cost of living crisis. We're all now paying the price for years of energy policy dither and delay, not least the UK's chronic lack of gas storage. Ofgem says it may have part of the answer, but will it work? And that's our On the Money question today. Will more frequent energy price cap changes help to lower household fuel bills? Grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff. That's what we do on this programme. And today I'm joined by Angela Knight, friend of the show, former CEO at UK Energy, former Treasury Minister, of course. Charles McAllister, he's weighing in again, Policy Manager at UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Great to have you with us. And Helen Thomas, CEO and founder of Blonde Money. We can't keep her away. A fabulous panel. Angela, let's go to you first. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's just talk first. I've done a kind of double-headed debate today because they are linked. That Ofgem energy price cap. Do you favour moving to more frequent changes to that price cap? Because after all, Angela, that's a good thing if wholesale prices are going down because you pass on the lower prices to households quicker. But if prices are going up, it means households are more exposed to more expensive fuel.
Yeah, well, I think we need to be clear, Liam, that there's no answer here which you would say, that's good. It's a question of which is the better of two pretty uncomfortable options. Now, as we look ahead with, as you've already said, the likelihood of the war between Russia and Ukraine coming to some form of a conclusion towards the end of the year or maybe just after. But also, if we add to that we are, all of us in Europe and indeed in much of the world, going into a period in which economies slow or indeed stagnate or even we have a recession. What that's saying, put together, is that the overall demand for oil and gas starts to reduce and the big uncertainty caused by the war starts to go away. Therefore, the assumptions, and it's only assumptions, are that the current high prices will start to reduce. And so if caps are adjusted quicker, then of course people get the benefit of that reduction quicker. It also means that those who are buying ahead, which is what the major suppliers do, they buy ahead the gas, they buy ahead the power, then they're not freezing in the higher prices for too long a period. But as I say, there are downsides to it. So I don't think anybody should go away and say, that's the magic answer. Unfortunately, there isn't one.
Very interesting. Thank you, Angela. Helen Thomas, what do you make of this? It sounds like a good idea, but there are, of course, downsides. However, Angela Knight makes the point. I mean, basically, if Ofgem makes this move and ministers approve it, the ministers are betting on a slowing global economy. A lot of China's still in return to lockdown because of Omicron. A slower global economy, lower energy prices than we otherwise would have expected. move the cap quicker, get those lower prices to households?
If governments are in the business of predicting what financial markets are going to do, we are in deep trouble, OK? Because let's be honest, even people, my clients who invest every single day were taken aback by the speed and scale of the moves in the market. So that part, to me, is farcical, and it's unfortunately a sign of a government that continues to be very short-termist, to sort of just hope and pray things might get a bit better. I think, and I would actually consider that there's a strong chance that prices will go up, and they'll keep going up.
Me too.
Goodness me, this war, the Russia-Ukraine war, it's really a Western financial system versus Russia et al. On the other side, right? That's not ending.
Not just Russia, China, Brazil. They're all getting together, aren't they, forming their own financial system?
Yeah, exactly. And then we see, Sweden and Finland, etc., want to be involved with NATO. So, look, that's not going to end tomorrow. And even if they all sign some sort of peace deal, even with Mr. Putin still there, I think unlikely. So I think that what we should really be talking about is, and we have on this show many times, I'm sure we will again, what is our energy policy? You talked about storage. Where are we getting it from? How can we secure it? Instead of fiddling about at the edges with this stuff.
Taking VAT off fuel bills, that's something that I certainly want to do. Awkward, though, because it wouldn't apply in Northern Ireland unless you scrap the protocol. Let's see what happens there. Charles McAllister, let's come to you.
Yep.
I was taken aback when I read in the Telegraph this morning, a paper obviously I know well, that you've now got LNG imports. That's when you get natural gas, you convert it into liquid, you put it on ships with the big sort of bells on top, which we saw there during my monologue. We're turning away LNG because we haven't got the storage. Crikey!
Yeah, I think the Ofgem decision document is a little bit confused, in my opinion. I still can't tell if it's a capacity issue or if it's for maintenance, because they're two very different things. But all of this is related. I think Ofgem have realised there's going to be huge volatility in the market for long term, but the volatility will be over short periods of time. That's why they're changing it from every other quarter to every quarter. The reason why they realise that is in these sorts of months, the warmer months, we're oversupplied with LNG when we don't need it. In the colder months, we're undersupplied, so we're paying over the nose when we need it most.
And so, Helen was quite scathing there, strong words from her saying, look, the government's basically, if they're in the business of trying to bet on energy markets, this could backfire. Do you see any in these Ofgem details, and I know you and your colleagues at UK Onshore Oil and Gas would look at them closely. Is it a necessity to change the cap every 3 months, or is it a possibility of changing the cap every 3 months?
It's difficult to say without seeing the consultation document, so I'm not going to jump to conclusion.
But that's the key element of this.
Very important, yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult to say. But one thing, as I said, if you look at for LNG, as the UK CS depletes, unless we start fracking in the UK, obviously, Liam, which I would support.
I was going to ask you about fracking, because I wasn't quite sure on your view on that, Charles. You never made it clear to me in the past.
No, I'm a big fan. No, I think if we don't increase North Sea production and if we don't start fracking in the UK ASAP, we are going to be locked into reliance on LNG, competing with 43 other countries. It's effectively an international game of tug of war. Look at gas demand in the Asia Pacific by 2050. It's meant to double. So the tension to get supplies is going to be ferocious.
And that LNG, of course, it comes from the US. It comes
shale gas from America.
It comes from Qatar.
Russia.
Indeed. Indeed. I was going to mention. Angela Knight, let's go back to you. Just, you've been around UK policymaking quite a few years, if I may say so. I hope that's not lacking in chivalry. I've been around a few years myself, Angela. Why do we not have enough gas storage? Why did we close down that Rough facility, the Rough field off the coast of Yorkshire there in the North Sea, a huge underground cavern where we were storing gas? Why haven't we got enough storage at Milford Haven? What have ministers been doing for years and years and years?
Not a lot is the answer. What ministers have done is they've been focused very much on the whole business of shut down coal, open up wind, it'll all be all right, and there's a wholesale market for gas, and it's all, there's lots of gas around, and so you can just do it that way. And you are right, you can blame ministers, but if I may say, ministers come and ministers go. The continuity is provided by the civil service. And there is something in there in respect of the advice that ministers have got that has been in a very strange place for a very long period of time. There's not enough engineers, there's not enough scientists, certainly, within, and I'm not really, it sounds like I'm blaming people, I'm just trying to say it as it is. You know, there's not enough scientists, there's not enough engineers, and that has resulted in a very narrow rather than a very broad, than the broader focus that's required. And I agree with everything that's been said by the other two on your programme, Liam, that, you know, it is right to be scathing. It is right to say that this is tinkering around the edges. There's lots of pieces in this jigsaw, and the jigsaw is not a coherent one, and it doesn't look like there's an agreed picture. But what does need to happen is anything that can be done to help what is a short situation should be done in respect of both supply when we need it and also in terms of pricing for the poor ends of society. And we have got to get on with the long-term plan of being much more self-sufficient ourselves, which is as much gas as we can get locally, whether it's fracked or out of the North Sea. I'm happy with both. Appreciate there's problems, but I'm happy with both. That's for the short term. But also building the long-term secure energy supply we need, or electricity supply certainly, which is nuclear, and it's small-scale nuclear particularly, because they can be produced, built quickly, they're repeatable, and what's more, you can get external finance. It doesn't just rely on the government balance sheet, that is the taxpayer. Get on with the plan, says I.
Angela, let me just bring in Helen Thomas here for a final word. Helen, I saw over the weekend there are signs that Kwasi Kwarteng, our current business secretary, energy secretary, he is going to redefine gas. So it's a green fuel. So it seems that the UK's sort of COP26 agenda is slightly softening at the edges, is becoming a bit more pragmatic.
Well, they have to get more pragmatic to a degree. But again, however, it does tap into what we've just heard there from Angela. What is the long-term strategy to be self-sufficient and tackle the undoubtable climate issues, and how do we pay for it? And I would say, unfortunately, again, that does feel a bit tinkering around the edges.
Well, I think we've all decided that we're not too impressed by this Ofgem energy price cap moving around. Seems like a bit of a bet on the markets by the regulators, by the government, but we shall see. As you say, Charles, the devil really is in the detail. Thanks for coming in, Charles McAllister of UK Offshore Oil and Gas. We'll talk about fracking another time. And indeed, Angela Knight, former Treasury Minister, former CEO at Energy UK, and Helen Thomas is staying with me. Now, this is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we speak to Greg Marsh, another friend of the show. He's from Nous, a company that helps people with those household fuel bills, that helps them with their broadband and all kinds of other consumer-facing issues. Greg says we're being fleeced by the mobile and broadband providers. So they, of course, deny wrongdoing. Find out more after the break. You're On the Money.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:22. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News, TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. Well, phone and broadband companies are fleecing customers out of hundreds of pounds by using underhand tactics to put prices up well above the rate of inflation. Not my words, the words of Greg Marsh, CEO of Nous, a service which monitors how price rises impact household finances. In a new expose, Greg found that some tech giants are using the highest inflation rate they can find to justify increases their charges mid-contract without ever telling the customer what the total rise is. He calls it daylight robbery. These mobile and broadband providers are taking advantage at a time when households need simple, clear guidance. Well, here to tell us more about his research, Greg Marsh is in the studio. Greg, great to have you with us. Thanks for coming in.
Nice, Liam.
You're a really measured guy, and your whole living is data and analysis and being absolutely bang on with your facts. These are strong words.
They are. They're fair words as well. The challenge is, this is nothing illegal. There's not even anything which is technically improper about what the companies are doing, but we believe that it is unethical. And I'll tell you why. When you signed up for a mobile phone contract or a broadband service 12 months ago, 9 months ago, you didn't expect, nobody expected, that today inflation was going to be nearly 10%, the RPI measure of inflation.
New figure out on Wednesday, probably going to be about 9.5.
Now, the problem is that when you signed up for that contract, you were committed to a policy of in-contract price increases. That means that if the price increases and a measure that's locked to inflation, there's nothing you can do apart from pay exit fees.
Yeah.
And what companies are doing is getting away with not only increasing their prices by inflation, a measure like CPI, which is the one that
price index
most of us would use.
Currently at 7%.
7% at the moment, and that's already up a long way from this time last year. It was less than 2%.
That's right.
But they're using RPI. Now, RPI, the retail price index, is a measure of inflation which is so misleading that the Office of National Statistics has discredited it. Since 2013, they no longer use RPI. The only reason we believe that any company would want to use RPI is why? Because it's higher than CPI. So what they've done
is 9% of the
9%. So they've picked a number which is the highest number they can use, and that's already more than cheeky. That extra 2% difference, that could easily be £10 a month or more for a household with multiple phone contracts. Worse still, what they're doing on top of that 7%, or in the case of Virgin O2, 9%, is they're adding another 3.9%. Now, the problem with...
I'm going to have to check my phone bill.
You should check your phone bill. The problem with these inflation numbers is they sound like small numbers, 3%, 7%. And the way that companies will communicate you to them, they'll send you a little message, they'll send you an email saying, oh, it means that for a typical contract, your prices will rise this month by £1 or by £2. What they're not telling you is that for a typical household, which is not managing one mobile phone contract, but managing an average of 2.5 mobile phone contracts.
Really? Is that the average household now? Wow.
2.5 people, 2.5 mobile phone contracts, an average of £20 a month for those phone contracts, just for the contract, not for the device.
Yeah.
That means that that increase, that RPI plus 3.9%, for a typical household, that could equate to a very significant cost increase. And over a typical contract period, which is a 5-year period, most people stay with the provider.
So it's about 150, 200 quid a year. It's £1,000.
It's £100 a year over a 5-year period of excess cost for a typical household. So the amounts of money, the companies would have you believe that they're just small details. These are small amounts of money. But the effect on typical households right now is brutal. And although this is technically legal, it's more than sneaky. It's really unethical. Companies should not be allowed to increase their prices by more than inflation, and certainly not by more than CPI inflation, unless you also, as a consumer, have the right to cancel your contract.
Without paying those exit charges.
Without paying those exit charges.
Now, we are going to read out, we've obviously talked to lots of the providers. They don't want to come and talk to me, of course. Well, not of course on this occasion. It'd be nice if they did at some stage. But we are going to read out their rights of reply in a minute. But just before we do, Greg, weighing your words even more carefully than you normally do, because we are obviously a regulated broadcaster, is this across the board? Are some providers, under your analysis, worse than others? Are some providers doing the right thing?
Some providers are doing the right. I wish there was a longer list of the good guys. But Tesco Mobile, for instance, has a really fair pricing policy. Some of the other companies supply rolling 30-day contracts. We've got a long list on our website. If you go to
rather than 5-year lock-ins with exit fees.
Rather than typically 18 months or 24-month lock-ins. But of course, not all of us remember to switch when we're out of contract. Top tip, if you're out of contract, switch, or at least look at switching.
Just put a reminder in your phone, in your calendar, 3 years ahead when you're coming out of contract.
Or use a service like ours at Now.co. Make sure you keep track of it. So we've got a list on our site, Now.co/bandits. We track all of the companies. We stand by our analysis. We're tracking it day by day. You can find out what your provider is doing. They're not all as bad as each other. Some of them are much more cheeky than others. But the things to watch out for are RPI rather than CPI, and that sneaky surcharge of 3.9%. Where does that come from?
Sneaky surcharge. Greg Marsh, very nice analysis. Well done. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing this exclusive research with us here on GB News. We'll see you again another time. Now, it is important, of course, at GB News we have fair and balanced discussions, not least when we're talking about business and finance. And we asked several companies for a comment. A Virgin Media O2 spokesperson said, while we recognise a price change is never welcome, with rising costs and customers using more data than ever, this price increase will fuel further investment in our network and services. They also added that for Virgin, customers will see bills increase each April by the January rate of RPI plus 3.9%. In 2022, January's rate was 7.8%. O2, they told us most customers will receive a straight RPI price increase only, as this is what's outlined in the T's and C's, the terms and conditions at the point of sale for those who joined upgraded prior to the 25th of March 2021. When asked for a comment, Vodafone said, "We know no one wants to see price increases, but these reflect the rising costs that we continue to face in running our network and providing our services. They're essential for us to maintain investment in our network and services and continue to improve our customers' experience on our network. Customers who took out a contract from the 9th of December 2020 will see an increase in their monthly bill from April 2022 based on the Consumer Price Index rate published in April, plus 3.9%, 9.3% in total." And finally, EE told us price rises are never popular, but are sometimes a necessary part of business. If we're to keep up with the rising costs we face and ensure we can continue to deliver a brilliant network experience as customers' usage of data grows month on month. And BT Mobile, well, they didn't offer a comment, but we welcome all these companies. We give them the opportunity to appear on my show any time you want. Come and talk to us. We can help you talk to your providers and your customers. Thanks to our guest today. This is on the... Greg, I think I'm being asked to ask you some more questions.
Sure.
So let's talk about why can they get away with this? A lot of people would think, surely there should be... Where's this extra 3.9% come from, apart from on top of RPI?
I don't exactly know why that number, but I can tell you that everyone's converged on the same number, which always makes you smell a rat. Now, we saw in the Queen's speech last week that there was new legislation announced that will regulate the way that companies that supply subscriptions, like broadband and mobile phone, are examples of subscriptions, preventing those companies from doing things like in-contract price increases unless they're very clearly advertised at the start of the contract, and also making it easier for customers to cancel their contracts at the end of their contract period without having to phone up. What we'd like to see is Ofcom really rattling their sabre now. We'd like to see Ofcom hold the regulated companies, the broadband companies, the mobile phone companies to account, and ensure that they're providing that minimum level of consumer protection today. The reason this is so important is, again, a typical UK household does not have one mobile phone. They have 3 or 2 mobile phones. They have broadband internet, and they need it. So the typical UK household is spending something between £500 and £1,000 a year on these effectively essential services. So a 10%, a 12% increase in prices each year for these kinds of services, that's £100, maybe even £200 a year of extra cost for a typical household. That comes at a time when UK households, as you've been covering repeatedly on the show, Liam, are facing an unprecedented set of price increases, everything from their fuel costs to their energy bills to their council tax bills. They're facing higher tax burdens with national insurance contributions and, of course, their mortgage rates going up. So taken as a whole, this is just another thing, another bit of weight on the shoulders of UK households at a time when they can't afford it.
Now, the broadband providers, if they were here, and I say again, they're absolutely welcome. Just briefly, Greg, they are investing in the network, though. Some of this money is going into making coverage better, fewer, dead areas. So as we go forward, our mobile network improves.
It does, but let's also be clear. That is included in their pricing. They could absolutely put forward prices which included the cost of investing in their network and services. Why they need to have an above-inflation increase to cover the cost of network infrastructure? Well, because they can get away with it. Because these are in the small print that consumers don't read when you're in the store. You're busy, you're distracted, you just want to get the contract signed. So to some extent, yep, this is what we signed up for. As I said at the outset, this is not illegal, but it does take advantage of the way that in practice consumers normally buy subscription services. And that's why we at Nous, but also journalists like you, we've got to keep an eye on these companies and make sure that they're held to account.
Greg Marsh, CEO of Nous, great to talk to you. Very, very important story, and we'll have you back on the show another time to see how these mobile broadband providers are getting on. Now, coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with the publican Adam Brooks. He'll be sharing the details of his childhood growing up above his parents' pub in London's East End, as well as his current vision for the UK hospitality industry. That's after the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the government believes it can make significant changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol within the original protocol framework. Boris Johnson's due to hold emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders today in a bid to break the Stormont deadlock. McDonald's says it started a process to sell its business in Russia. The fast food giant closed all its restaurants in the country in March, having operated there for 30 years. McDonald's says the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine has meant it's no longer tenable to continue business in Russia. Sweden will send diplomats to Turkey today in an attempt to overcome their objections to the Scandinavian nation joining NATO. Applications for new membership require unanimous approval from all existing NATO members. Sweden is expected to make a formal bid today, following Finland confirming it would apply for membership yesterday. The London mayor says he feels incredibly safe after reportedly being named on a kill list by a US shooting suspect. Sadiq Khan was listed in a 180-page manifesto called Kill High-Profile Enemies that had been published online by Peyton Gendron. Gendron's accused of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in the US city of Buffalo on Saturday. The London mayor says the best response to a terror threat is resilience. The Queen received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She was there for a star-studded celebration of her Platinum Jubilee in the grounds of Windsor Castle. It's her first public outing since March, having missed the state opening of Parliament due to mobility issues. You're up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.23 to the dollar, the pound is 1.18 to the euro, and the price of gold currently stands at £1,470.09 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:38. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And my guest today is Adam Brooks. He's the owner of two iconic pubs in Essex, the Owl Public House in Loughton and the Three Colts in Buckhurst Hill. During lockdown, Adam emerged as a leading hospitality industry advocate, amassing over 240,000 followers on Twitter. As COVID restrictions took hold, Adam repeatedly spoke out against lockdown measures, accusing Prime Minister Boris Johnson and other ministers of throwing good pubs and other businesses to the wolves for no good scientific reasons. So here he is, publican extraordinaire Adam Brooks, my latest guest on Money Talks. Adam, great to have you here on Money Talks. You're a proud publican. You've got a couple of pubs in Essex. You're from a East End family of publicans. You grew up in the business. But in recent years, you've really emerged as a campaigner for the hospitality industry. Why did you speak up the way you have?
Really, because I think it was quite obvious quite early that things weren't adding up, Liam. You know, a lot of the restrictions that they were placing upon us didn't make sense. A lot of the information we was getting from the CMOs, the media, and many of the MPs was very, very exaggerated, and that was obvious. Not that I'm an expert, but I think it became pretty clear with other voices and other experts in those fields that the government and the propaganda was there to sort of scare people and keep people sort of controlled. So, you know, when I really sort of got the ump and become quite aggressive campaigning against the government and such was when they, I call it the press conference of doom, when they showed literally it was a line to 3,000 deaths a day.
You mentioned the CMO, the Chief Medical Officer.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Because it was really during lockdown that you became very prominent, Adam, and you've amassed hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers. You've really got quite a lot of influence.
Yeah.
And a lot of journalists follow you and report your tweets these days.
Yeah.
You did, as we say in East London, get the ump.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of people get the ump, but they don't all become sort of social media sensations and really effective campaigners as you've become.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
Well, I mean, I had quite a few followers anyway because my businesses were quite popular. I call it the Towie effect. Celebrities.
The only way is Essex?
Yeah, the celebrities and footballers that used to come to my venues before I had the pubs. So, you know, I had a base. But, you know, I used Twitter and social media to sort of express my anger, my thoughts. You know, rather than it sending me a little bit mad inside, I'd find myself tweeting what I was thinking. And it wasn't really for likes or like retweets or anything like that. It was me getting out my thoughts and saying what I wanted to say. And, you know, some days I was looking at it thinking, wow, I've had 2,000 retweets there. And
that's quite a lot.
Or I've had blah-de-blah journalist retweeting me, or that MP is liking that. And suddenly I realised that maybe what I was saying was resonating with not only like-minded people to myself, but I had Labour MPs, Conservative MPs, you know, top-name journalists suddenly liking or retweeting my tweets. I was thinking, you know, I better be careful what I put here. I have got a big audience. And, you know, really, I decided to sort of hone that in and try and use it for some good, Liam. You know, and lucky enough, Alan Miller brought me into the Together Declaration, which is a campaign group.
So he founded the famous Vibe Bar in East London.
Yeah.
He's a big representative of the hospitality industry, particularly the nightlife industry across London and the South East.
Yeah. So, you know, I'd never met Alan, funny enough, before sort of all this. And we was really sort of brought together campaigning against vaccine passports, which was a threat for so many months. And it was a threat that would, I feel, almost end hospitality overnight, because, you know, it doesn't matter if 80% of people have had their vaccines. They do not want a checkpoint society where, you know, whether it be going to a pub, a cafe, or even the supermarket, they do not want to have to show a QR code. And, you know, I'm a father of three kids. I didn't want that as their future either. And I thought if we could try and nip this in the bud now, it might send a message if they try it again down the line. So there was a lot of personal, you know, and selfish reasons as well. You know,
Business reasons.
I'm a business owner. I don't do
moral
it.
reasons too.
Exactly that.
Your kind of sense of freedom and the relationship between the state and society, what that relationship should be.
Yeah.
I want to come on to the cost of living crisis, Adam, because you know you're a very prominent small businessman, but you do run small businesses at the sharp end, and I think the insights of small business leaders are absolutely vital, and journalists should take more notice of them. But before we do come on to the cost of living crisis, I just want to ask you another question about the COVID era. That's when we got to know each other, as it were. The public inquiry is forthcoming. I think if it wasn't for the war in Ukraine, Partygate, you know, the cost of living crisis, journalists would be absolutely fixated on what that public inquiry should say, its scope, its terms of reference. We know none of that already. We know none of the time frame for that public inquiry into the COVID pandemic. We don't know whether it's going to report before the next election, for instance. But just in a nutshell, Adam, what are your thoughts about what that public inquiry should be? What do we want to glean from it going forward?
We've got to learn from possible mistakes, and we've got to hold these politicians and civil servants to account that they can't just put restrictions upon businesses without evidence. You know, Sacha Lord, the Night Times are of Manchester, Hugh Osmond, very, very well.
The bloke who runs Punch Taverns, one of the biggest publicans in the country.
You don't get much bigger in hospitality than Hugh. They took the government to court, and it was timed out because, in our opinion, they had no evidence to prove what these restrictions were there for, really.
So these were publicans trying to sue the government for these restrictions that you and others felt were unfairly, illegally impinging on your businesses.
You know, we need to know, did they have impact assessments? Did they know what this was going to do? Did they have the evidence that, okay, we call it the Scotch egg rule. You know, we're going to implement that on
substantial meal.
Right. So we're going to implement that. How many lives or how many transmissions do we feel that's going to, you know, stop or save? And I do not believe that the majority of the hospitality restrictions had any evidence or any effect on transmissions. It is my opinion that they was there to almost put people off going to hospitality and make it, you know, a chore. And therefore they would get less transmissions out there through lack of business. Now, I think that will come out, but let's see.
You've said that you feel a culture of fear was deliberately instigated.
100%. 100%. Fear is control, isn't it? And the nonsensical restrictions that they put on hospitality were laughed at. And people like myself, Sasha, Hugh, warned of, say, the consequences of a 10 p.m. curfew. We said what would happen. Within days, there was crowds outside venues, there was crowds on buses, in town centres, it was carnage.
Because chucking out time was so much earlier.
Right. You know, we just wanted the evidence. We wanted to see their, you know, the evaluation of why they did that. Now, Dominic Raab turned around in an interview, I think it was with Sky, I'm not sure, that they simply copied Belgium. They thought it was a good idea. Now, how many of our restrictions and laws were hunches or because other countries had done it? That's not good enough. You know, I've got friends that have lost businesses. You know, I'm sat here now with 2 bounce back loans that I've got another 4 years running to pay them. I'm reminded every day I open my NatWest app of what I owe. Now, why should I have had to borrow to keep my businesses afloat? I think it's a disgrace, and I think, you know, it will come out in the wash, Liam.
The pandemic lockdown, of course, it was meant to lead to a bounce-back recovery, a V-shaped recovery. Your business is meant to be booming right now, but we've gone straight back into a cost of living crisis. Big inflation, obviously the impact on food and fuel prices of war in Ukraine. As somebody running a couple of successful businesses in the southeast of England, so, you know, pretty prosperous part of the country, with all respect, we all have our difficulties. How's it for you?
Well, I've got 2 good pubs, thankfully, touch wood. I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen costs so high. You know, I've actually got friends in the business where their energy and their utilities are more than their rent. Now, you tell someone that 2 or 3 years ago, they would have laughed at you.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a backstreet pub that I'm out of contract. I'm caught out of contract, and I'm not signing the prices that are there at the moment. You know,
for fuel,
for electric.
Yeah.
Now that's sort of £3,500 a month for a small backstreet pub. I've got £1,000 gas. That's £4,500 a month I've got to find just to heat and run my pubs. That's without water. That's without rent. That's without everything else.
Staff, beer, food.
You know. So, you know, we go back to beer. My brewery that I'm tied to, they've just sent me an email that all my prices have gone up. Everything.
Because wheat and barley and grain and all the raw materials of beer have gone up.
But us being the end user, we're facing the public. So we're the end of the chain in that supply chain. We cannot pass on all those costs that our suppliers have passed on to us. So, you know, as I said earlier, pints should probably be £7, £8. We could never charge that. We'd have no one come in. So we're stuck with less margin, and we're stuck trying to cut costs elsewhere, and it's hard.
So how much, with all respect, Adam, have you put prices up on average of a pint of beer, say, in the last 6 months? And how much should they have gone up if you wanted to maintain your margin?
Well, I've gone up about 10% at the moment. But again, as I said, we should probably be up 30, 40% on the price.
So that's a big squeeze of your margin,
big squeeze.
your profitability, your ability to invest in your business, expand your business, pay your staff, and so on.
So, you know, I think I've had a busy weekend. On a Monday, I do all my figures, and it's surprising how little left there is. And you think you've had a busy weekend, you know. So everything is coming to a head now, and if it goes any further, there's no point opening the doors of certain businesses. And I think,
even in a prosperous place,
your pubs,
place, I know exactly where they are. I live in the same part of the country as you. They are in really nice parts of the world in the southeast of England. You know, fair play to you. You've done very well. You come a long way from the East End of London where you started. But if even you are struggling to make a margin, how are your fellow publicans doing across the rest of the country?
There's many publicans out there. Again, I'm lucky. I don't live on site. I have good staff that run my businesses for me. There's many publicans that their pubs feed them, you know.
House them.
It's their whole lifestyle. I've lived above pubs. I don't do it now. but it is a lifestyle. Now, you're going to see a lot of these operators that are getting to the point where is it worth them doing it any longer? But then they're going to lose their home, their livelihood. And I do believe that in the next 6 months, if nothing changes, if Rishi Sunak or Boris doesn't help us with VAT or business rates or some sort of support package, hospitality will take a huge dive in the next 6 months.
Adam Brooks, thanks for appearing on Money Talks and all the best with your businesses.
Thank you. Cheers, Liam.
And that was Adam Brooks. You can listen to the full 25-minute version of that interview now on my Money Talks podcast. Also, watch it on the GB News YouTube channel or via the GB News app. Adam, he's got plenty to say from the front line of business. Now, this programme's often said the Bank of England's been behind the curve when it comes to inflation. In other words, by spending much of last year claiming UK price pressures were, quotes, transitory and failing to raise interest rates, the bank's actions mean tackling now very serious inflation will mean interest rates need to go higher and stay high for longer than otherwise would have been the case, causing more economic pain. Well, later this afternoon, Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey appears before the Commons Select Committee of MPs, where he's expected to face some pretty critical questioning. Joining me now is Lord Michael Forsyth, Conservative peer, former Cabinet Minister. Until very recently, Michael, you were chair of the Lord's Economic Affairs Select Committee, which last year wrote a pretty scathing report criticising the bank's quantitative easing programme. We've not got long left on this particular episode of On the Money, but what are your thoughts, Michael, on how the Bank of England's conducted itself over recent months?
I think it's completely dropped the ball and forgotten that its main duty is to control inflation. And it's been playing politics with the government. And the government have used them very effectively to finance their expenditure, although the government has claimed in common with the Bank of England that that hasn't been happening. But they raised some 450 billion. They printed 450 billion. And that just happened to coincide with the money that Rishi needed in order to cover the furlough and other schemes.
There are now signs on the currency market that sterling's coming under pressure because we've done all this quantitative easing. We're not doing quantitative tightening like the US is, reining in that big money supply. The Bank of England didn't raise interest rates by as much as the US Federal Reserve. Of course, if the pound does fall, imports become more expensive, you get more inflation. Do you think parliamentarians are now seriously considering whether or not the Bank of England governor should consider his position?
I don't know about that, but I think certainly the bank ought to stick to their mandate. And I think there is a problem about groupthink in the Monetary Policy Committee. What they need to do is to appoint a few more people who actually understand monetary economics. The governor himself is not an economist. And it's perfectly clear that when they said last year in response to our report that inflation was a transitory phenomenon, they got it right. So the first thing the government's got to do is admit he's made a mistake and also ensure that going forward there isn't as much groupthink and that the Treasury has less involvement in appointing people who are mirror images of themselves.
So you think, Michael Forsyth, that the Monetary Policy Committee, it's a 9-strong committee of economists who decide interest rates, decide how much quantitative easing we do, increasing the money supply, as you say. There should be more different, varied opinions on that committee. Dissent and conversation and discussion should be seen as a good thing.
Exactly. And if you look at the first MPC, it was made up of distinguished people, and you even had the people in the Bank of England openly disagreeing with each other. But I do think that the Monetary Policy Committee does not have enough economists with real monetary experience. There's just been a new appointment, which I think is a trade person. And there's a tendency to go along with the orthodoxy, and in this case the orthodoxy has released inflation. I mean, they said that they were going to shrink their balance sheet and reverse quantitative easing when interest rates got to 1%, which they are now. Now they're delaying it till August. So the spirit of St. Augustine is alive and well in Threadneedle Street. Oh Lord, make me pure, but not yet. And we're all going to pay a very heavy price for that in inflation.
Lord Forsyth, thanks for that interview. We'll talk to you more in the weeks and months to come on this important subject. Lord Michael Forsyth there, former Tory peer and former chair of the Lord's Economic Affairs Select Committee. All we got time for today. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. A warm and humid day for most today. Some big thundery showers around this afternoon. And across much of Scotland, it's going to stay grey and wet. There's low pressure lurking in the Atlantic, but it's just kind of milling around here and throwing up warm and humid air from the south. Hence why we could see some big thunderstorms this afternoon, particularly over Wales and the Midlands, and then drifting northwards into Northern Ireland and parts of northern England. Some very heavy rain is possible in a short space of time. Meanwhile, the southern half of England turning largely dry this afternoon. We'll keep a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain across Scotland. Quite a cold day in eastern Scotland, but elsewhere quite warm and humid, particularly if the sun pops out. Temperatures could get up to 23, maybe 24 Celsius, but still some very heavy showers around. Not great on the roads for this evening's rush hour. That's the M6 and the M5 in particular, but those thundery showers should ebb away. We'll always keep some cloud and rain across northern Scotland, but for most it becomes dry overnight. It's a little misty in places, temperatures holding up in double figures, so another pretty warm night. Notice out west though there is another band of rain that's going to edge in during Tuesday, spread across Northern Ireland, eventually into Wales and southwest England, and it'll turn wet during tomorrow afternoon in western parts of Scotland as well. Elsewhere, for many places, it's a fine day, staying quite misty and murky around the Northern Isles, but quite a bit of sunshine over central and eastern parts, and a warmer day, 25, 26, maybe even 27 Celsius. Obviously cooler with this rain further west. It could be quite heavy again by the end of the day, and then later tomorrow through the evening, a risk of further thundery showers coming up from France across parts of eastern England. So plenty going on this week. Low pressure remains out west. Weather fronts continue to drift in, but all the time warm air never too far away from parts of England. Plenty going on this week. Further thunderstorms likely.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till